Okay, I happen to be in a very Blair Witch part of the woods right now. I think today we're going to switch gears on the topic I'm going to cover. The video I'm going to reference today, I'll link below, and it has to do with starting a YouTube channel and people who procrastinate, who have all sorts of reasons of why they want to start one, but they just have this reason or that reason to not start one. Make sure to check out that link below. It'll be very interesting, especially if you're interested in starting your own YouTube channel. Okay, so I wanted this video to be about my personal history with social media, something that impacts a lot of us. Okay, so if you go back to when I was in high school, we didn't have social media because the internet was still sort of brand new. Back when I was in high school. Many high schoolers today, of course, they've had the internet ever since first grade. Okay, so I would say I probably only knew 2 people in high school that knew a little bit about the internet. One was what you would call a computer nerd and used the internet, or back then it was more of like a bulletin message board. Okay, so I had one other friend who was very rich, and so her family had a computer, and that computer, I knew that she had AOL, which was like the new thing that just came out, where, you know, the sound effect of "you got mail."
You've got mail.
Okay, so prior to that, the way the internet kind of worked was you hooked it up through a phone line, and everyone is familiar with that sound effect for connecting to the internet. And then if someone else tried to pick up the phone while you were on the internet, then they couldn't make a phone call and your internet would get disconnected, and it was a whole big thing. It wasn't until after high school that I went to community college, and I was required to set up an email account for some stuff we had to do in college. Wasn't required to register or anything, but wasn't required to look up your grades. But I remember for some reason they wanted us to set up an email account. So I set up the email account, and I'm sure I used some silly name at hotmail.com, and I hardly ever checked that email. It was for school only. I didn't know anyone else that even had email, so I certainly wasn't emailing friends and family, and that was something that was just an account that I used for anything having to do with school. Let's skip ahead to years later when the internet became more of a common thing. It was still people using the AOL that you had to pay. I don't remember how it worked back then, if you had to pay a monthly fee or if you only got so many minutes a month of how often you could use the internet. But I know that I had an aunt and uncle, they had a computer, and they had the little AOL disc that came in the mail. You had to load the disk to get the AOL on your computer in order to connect, and then so you would sit through that internet connecting sound. Then as soon as you logged in, it usually said, "You've got mail." And the mail was usually junk mail, so spam, but like everything back then was all brand new, so you would get advertisements sent to you about things that had nothing to do with anything you would ever be interested in. And maybe back in those days people fell for those sort of scams, I don't know. But I was in my 20s at this point. I would go to my aunt and uncle's house and I would try to log in to their computer. So back then there were ways to connect with other people, and that was usually through a message board. You would usually go into a message board and look up a certain topic you were interested in, and if there were certain things you were interested in, you would look to see if there was a website that had to do with that. Now, there was no Google where if you want to look something up or you want to find a website, you type it into Google. And there were, I'm assuming, some sort of search engine, but it was probably just AOL based at that point in time. But this was all still on my aunt and uncle's computer. I did not have a computer of my own at this time. This is still when buying a brand new computer was like, you know, $3,000. Now computers, of course, nowadays are $3,000. But back then it was just kind of like, no one could afford that. You had to get like financing just to buy a computer back then. Okay, so one of the things I did was I was trying to look up things online, what was online at that point in time in the beginnings of the internet. And so I randomly looked up a band that I liked at the time. This is of course me being young. I looked up a band called MXPX. Lo and behold, I think that band is actually from Washington, even though I did not live anywhere near Washington at the time, and nor did I even know very much about the band, which is partly why I looked them up online to see if they even had a website. I knew their music because I'd heard it on the radio, but I went online and they did have a website. One of the things they had on their website was like a message board where you could message other MXPX fans, and people would type about the latest album that just came out, the concert that they just saw, when the next concert date was going to be coming up. And so I went in there and I started, you set up a username and you chat with other people. And I spent a lot of time doing that. And I know that's silly because that's such like a small, unknown niche band at the time, but that was kind of my gateway into using the internet and using message boards and connecting with other people. And so this is where it's kind of like the beginnings of social media, because you're basically meeting other people. And at that point in time, I was meeting people that also like the same band as me. So eventually I decided that I wanted my own computer, so I didn't have to keep going to my aunt and uncle's house. And I think there was kind of like this thing where if you couldn't afford the $3,000 to go to, I don't know, Circuit City to buy a gateway computer, there was kind of like this whole underground thing of where someone would build a computer for you. Or of course you could build it yourself if you knew how to. I did not know how to. So you could usually find classified ads in the newspaper of people saying they would build you a computer for like $300. And sure, I don't know what, how good of equipment that was. But, I saved up all my money and I jumped at the chance to get someone to build me a computer. I went to someone's house. It looked like this is something they did as a hobby in their spare time. And they built me a computer. So now I had my own computer. And I had my own way to like connect to the internet. And, I started talking to other people that also use the computers for, it seemed like some people were really into like gaming. And I wasn't into video games. But I would talk to my friends and I'd say, yeah, I just got a computer. Yeah, I was like really excited about that. Okay, so then I had a friend who I knew from high school, but now we're in our 20s. And he had asked me if I knew about IRC, which I did not know what IRC was. He told me about IRC. And what I figured out was IRC was actually the same message board that had been integrated into the MXPX website. So IRC is actually many different message boards. You can break out your own message board into whatever topic you want to talk about. So that's why that particular band website had their own message board about their band. But IRC, you could just start up your own one-on-one conversation with someone. You could join other message boards that were active. And so I would go on there and just try to look up stuff that I liked. And usually I would research like music or movies, try to find other people that like the same thing. Now at this point in time, I'm living on the West Coast. You could be talking to people all the way in New York. You could be talking to people in Florida. You could be talking to people in Canada. You could be talking to people in Europe. And this is where it really was interesting to me, because now I'm meeting all these people. I'm meeting people all over the world. And this is where people usually end up taking their conversations offline or meeting in person. I had met many people in person after meeting them online. And there was not online dating at this point, but it was just talking in the message boards. So this was kind of what the whole, beginnings of social media as I see it. A typical conversation of what would go on in these message boards is where you typically hear the phrase ASL, which stands for age, sex, location. So someone would come into the message board room, I don't know what you want me to call it, and they would type ASL, and people would usually respond with, 24F for female of Miami. And so people would be like, I've been to Miami, or you're 24, did you just graduate college? What college did you go to? And so just the ASL prompt usually started up conversations with, the idea that you don't want to be talking to someone who's completely, out of age range for who you should be talking to. And that's why there probably was separate rooms for people that are like seniors, 65 and older, aren't going to be in chat rooms with people that are like 21 years old and in college. So, okay, this is also, you could send someone a photo of what you look like. Are the photos real? Could you fake a photo? Probably. Send a picture of a model and say, yeah, that's me. Tell people how tall you are when they're never going to see you. You're behind a computer. No one's going to see you. But this did start to be the age of when people got webcams. I mentioned webcams because it's kind of seemed to be like this weird thing where people would just set up a webcam. Nowadays people have security cameras where their camera's running all day long. But back then they would set up a webcam and you could just watch someone and see what they do all day. They would record themselves eating, record themselves sleeping, and really boring, mundane things. And for some reason, this was like a big deal where you could be like, did you see that guy? Did you see that guy? What he had for breakfast? and then he slept for 8 hours. Yeah, I guess that was like really entertaining at the time. And I want to talk about that because there was someone who people would start setting up their own domain names and have a webcam and like post a little bio about themselves. So I randomly, not even sure how, I came across a girl and her website was loudgirl.com. And I remember this very clearly. And I'm sure if you try to look it up now, you'll probably not be able to find anything about her on the Wayback Machine or anything. But I can remember it so clearly because it was such a huge point of my life that I came across loudgirl.com, which seemed to be this girl. She had dark hair. She seemed to be kind of like plump, and she was always talking about how she wanted to lose weight, and she had a webcam, and she would leave her webcam on and you could see her in her room, and and she would type a little blog about her life, and people could leave comments on her blog and tell her things like, "You're so cool, I love your website." Okay, so this is where I reached out and I sent her a message, and I don't even remember what the message was. Something to the effect of, "You have a really cool website, I wish I could set up my own website," something like that. Okay, so what I was surprised is she messaged me back, and she was really rude to me, and she was like, "Who are you? Why are you watching my camera? This website's only for my friends." And I thought, this is public. Anyone in the whole world can find this. I'm assuming she must know that. And yeah, technically I am a stranger and I don't know her. But I thought people, I guess, tend to forget that what they put out online, anyone can find and anyone can see, including this video now. Okay, so I was taken aback by the fact that she acted that way towards me instead of treating me as a fan or as a future friend or whatever. She was just kind of like, "Who are you? You're not welcome here." And so that kind of like put a sour taste in my mouth, as the phrase goes. I will skip ahead to the fact that I actually did end up getting a webcam myself, and I did try to learn some HTML to set up my own website. And back then, webcams were so grainy you could barely even see me. And I'm sure the more expensive the camera, the better you could see, but mine was not one of the fancy ones. And it wasn't even something that I ended up sticking with. I had registered a website, didn't last long, never posted to it. The camera, I don't know if anyone ever saw me on the camera, and that just became, whatever, old news. Okay, so I'm gonna skip ahead a few years because even though I talked a lot about IRC, there's a point where people started using AIM Messenger, so AIM Messenger. And so sometimes I look back and I try to figure out why I stopped using IRC, because at that point I had built up so many friendships on there with people. And I think eventually people just transitioned to AIM, and that's why I started using the AIM Messenger. I really can't think of any other reason why I stopped using IRC. It was just, I guess, got old. People stopped using it. Anyone who's interested in what IRC was all about, if you're familiar with Slack, sometimes big companies use Slack. IRC was a lot like Slack. Slack uses a lot of the same IRC commands. One thing about being in message boards is constantly typing. I was not good at typing, and I got good at typing because in order to keep up in these message boards and to communicate with other people, you had to be able to type fast. And so I attribute my really fast typing. So started using AIM. Around the same time, I believe this is when, I was gonna say this is maybe when MySpace started, but I wanna skip around before I start talking about MySpace, because most people aren't familiar with MySpace. The website I wanted to mention is called LiveJournal. The only reason I'm mentioning this is because I can remember meeting a person, and a lot of times when you meet a person, you want to get to know them. You ask them like, "Where do you work? Where'd you go to school? What do you like to do for fun? What kind of music are you into?" Well, I remember meeting this person, and he was kind of like, "Well, if you want to know anything about me, just read my LiveJournal." And I thought, well, why would I read your LiveJournal when you're right here and you can tell me? But that was kind of like funny to me that he was like, "Well, if you want to know that, read my LiveJournal." So it's like, okay. So I went in, I went home, went online and looked up his LiveJournal, because hey, if you want to know about him, you got to look up the LiveJournal. And what I learned was that basically this is like an online diary. People would post on there once a day or even more than once a day, and they would post about everything they did that day. They would post what their favorite movies are, their favorite books, their favorite music. So you could really learn a lot about a person. Okay, and I'm sure there was probably maybe online dating starting around about this time, but it seemed like LiveJournal is where you really get to know a person, whereas online dating was kind of like someone would post their photo and their age, and then, you know, you didn't really get to know who they were as a person, especially when what you see in a photo isn't always what someone's like in real life. Okay, so now I'm gonna skip ahead to MySpace, because MySpace, I can remember, you know, how and why and when it all started. I just knew a lot of my friends were on it, and so in order for me to connect with my friends, it was like you go to MySpace and you connect with your friends. This is where you find out where the party's gonna be at on Friday night or whatever. Because of this, I was, you know, still in my 20s. Okay, so finding out where the party's gonna be at was kind of still a thing. And one thing I remember about MySpace is that it seemed like some people, like, you could post your photos on there, you could post like video clips, you post like silly jokes, and it was mainly about like listing out who all your friends are, and you add your friends, and then people could go to your page and see who all your friends are. And, you know, it's kind of like a popularity contest, sort of. It seemed. It did seem a little juvenile and high school-ish. So what I remember is something had happened. You know, I got in a fight with someone, and they were just like, well, you know, you're just silly. All you care about is like looking good on MySpace. And they started saying things like, your MySpace is so important to you, and that all the pictures you post on there, you know, you just want to like make it seem like you have this perfect life. And I thought, like, that's not me at all. Like, yeah, I post pictures, but I didn't think that I was like trying to come across as like, look at me, I'm so great. So I was a little surprised by what this person said, and I kind of took it as, well, if you think that about me, you know, watch this, because I'm just gonna delete my MySpace, because, you know, that'll show you how much I don't care about MySpace. And that's what I did. I deleted my MySpace, and I was kind of like, you know, that's stupid. I don't really care about this. You know, it's not important to me to like go online and list out who all my friends are and who are my top favorite friends. And, you know, I thought, like, if people really want to talk to me, you know, they'll just talk to me. They'll just call me on the phone. And this is where I'm going to go back to talking about the AIM Messenger again, because once again, I can remember a time where I pretty much talked to everyone on AIM Messenger, and I really feel like there was this time or transition where I completely stopped using AIM Messenger. And I try to think in my head, well, why did I stop using it? Because it was clearly very important at one point in time. But I think this is because people started getting text on their phone, where you could just text people. You didn't need to log into a computer and message people. It was just right there on your phone. And, you know, people, you know, weren't really calling people on the phone anymore. If you could just send a text, or if you want to be like, hey, meet me at 5 o'clock, just send a text. You don't have to like have this long drawn out conversation, or wait for someone to call you back, leave a voicemail, all that jazz. You just send a text, and then they text you back. Okay, so I think that's probably why I stopped using AIM Messenger, but, you know, I really couldn't think in my mind any other reason. So this is kind of how technology has progressed. Okay, now we're gonna skip ahead. You know, at this point I've explained that I had completely deleted MySpace. I was not on social media at all. If I wanted to talk to people, they would just text me. Whoops. Had fun climbing over that. But it did come several years later where I was very much aware that people were using Facebook. Some people still had their MySpace, but a lot of people had transitioned to Facebook, and I'm not really sure why or when that took place. But I knew that people were on Facebook. I was not on Facebook. I was kind of in a situation where having Facebook would have been helpful for the work I was in, but I didn't really want to join Facebook. I was kind of like, you know, I didn't want to deal with the drama that happened back when I had MySpace, so I don't want to do Facebook. But somewhere along the line, I joined Facebook. And this is where things get weird. And this is where we're going to reference the video that I mentioned that I've linked below. The video that I linked below lists out reasons why people are reluctant or afraid to start a YouTube. One being that they don't want to be seen as silly. They don't want people to see them on the internet and see them doing silly things on video, like their friends, their family, their coworkers might find them. And I get that. I totally get that. But I do believe that when she mentioned in her video reasons why people don't start a YouTube, meaning they don't know how to start a YouTube, it seems too difficult. They don't know how to film videos. They don't want their friends and family to find their video and make fun of them. They don't want strangers to find their video and make fun of them. And I think the other reason she lists off had to do with age, that only young people are on YouTube, which isn't true at all. But this idea that only young people know about technology and it's the young people that do all this online stuff and that older people don't know how to do it, that's really not true. And also the audience for YouTube is usually a much older audience. Okay, so getting back to why I mentioned her video is because I feel like there is one main reason, a very important reason why I did not want to start a YouTube, and that had to do with my experience on Facebook. And that kind of brings us up to this part of social media. I had a Facebook, and one thing about Facebook is you can set it on private so that it's not open for the whole world to see. Only your friends or family or whoever you add can see you. I was very much aware of what you put online, is going to be seen and judged. So, I was very careful about the things that I posted. Not that I was doing anything wrong in my real life, but, I would post pictures of myself. I post pictures of my friends with their permission. And I would just post like, here's me, hanging out at the park. Something totally innocent, okay? Not photos of me naked, not photos of me getting drunk, nothing like that. But one day, lo and behold, I was getting ready for work in the morning and I get a phone call. It's my work. They told me not to come into work that day. I thought, okay, I didn't know why. Thought maybe there was a power outage and the whole place was gonna be shut down for the day. I don't know. So I asked why. And they said, we saw your Facebook and we've decided to let you go. And don't bother coming in because we're gonna mail you your final check. And I thought, what? I'm thinking, how did they see my Facebook? Because it was set on private. B, there's nothing on my Facebook that would warrant firing me. I didn't do anything wrong. And so of course, C, I'm just kind of like, why is this happening? There was no warning given. I wanted answers, and they were very abrupt with me. Like, we're done with you, we're firing, we're mailing you your check. And I'm on the other end shocked and wanting answers why. What they really said was that it wasn't the fact that I had posted something bad on Facebook, but it was the fact that I had Facebook. The job I was in was working for a trade school. I worked in the financial aid department, and they said that they do not allow their employees to have social media, which I had never been told this rule before. And I was aware of many other employees that had Facebook. Okay, so the fact that they said because I had Facebook, because I had social media, I was fired. It was a shock to me. And of course, at that point in time, I was even thinking, well, if I'm gonna start applying for new jobs, I better delete my Facebook, because how many other companies have these kind of policies? I was so scared off the internet in a sense that it could affect my career in some way, just being on social media or being online. I got very protective about my identity. I was already careful about what I posted online to begin with, but this is where I was like, geez, now I want to delete everything. And what I found in trying to find a job is a lot of jobs, they would recommend that you start a LinkedIn. And once again, here's where you've got to put your face there, put your job history, and that jobs can look you up, which is great. It's like having an online resume. But I was just so scared that I was like, I don't even want to start a LinkedIn, because I was just thinking I'm gonna get fired. So I think this is a topic that wasn't mentioned in the video that I've linked below, but it is a very serious topic. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Anyways, let me skip ahead one last bit of social media. It is starting to rain, come down hard. Let me see if you can see what's going on here. Because I'm in the forest, I don't feel the rain, but you can hear the rain. Let me cover one last topic, and I apologize for the heavy rain sound. The last topic is when I eventually did give in and decided to start a LinkedIn, and I was, my LinkedIn is very professional. Lists all the jobs I've had, and I had people from my past jobs. They could write a little review on you, talk about what a great worker you were. And so I had people from my other jobs write recommendations for me, and I was really proud of my LinkedIn because I felt like it was very professional. I posted a photo on there of me in a business suit, and it was important to me because I was looking for jobs at the time. Here it happens again. What I was surprised was called to a job interview. They seemed very impressed with me. We went over my job history, everything. And then right in the middle of the job interview, he was like, give me a moment. And he typed something on his computer. And he's like, yeah, I just want to question you about your LinkedIn. And so I'm thinking, okay, I've got nothing to hide there. Everything's on my LinkedIn. And he started asking me questions about my work history, and he's like, well, why should we hire you when it says here on your LinkedIn? And I just kind of thought I didn't know that I was going to be quizzed on the spot about things I put on my LinkedIn. Everything on there's true. I've got nothing to hide. Feel free to call any of my past employers and ask them about my work history. And this person came across as like questioning everything that was on the LinkedIn. Like he didn't believe that I worked at certain places that I said I worked at. It was very weird. I would say that shortly after that, when I did find a job, a steady job, I deleted my LinkedIn because I felt like I really don't need it anymore. I'm not looking for a job. I don't need to have my information out there anymore. But that job interview experience was very strange. I'm also curious if any of you out there have ever had something like that happen to you. But that's kind of where I'm going to wrap up my past experience with social media, because here we are now, here on YouTube. I welcome you. I'm glad you're watching, and I would love to hear your feedback. Thank you.